In the dead of winter, when your beds look empty and your garden feels shut down, you can turn one free pile of clean wood chips into a garden meat patch that can still surprise you with a real harvest after a cold rain. And the first time it happens, it feels like a trick because the chips look dead. The air is cold. And then you see thick caps pushing up like something alive was hiding under your mulch the whole time. Think about how modern food works for a second, because it is almost silly when you say it out loud. Beef takes months and a whole chain of feed, water, transport, and cold storage, and you pay for it again and again. But this patch starts with the same wood chips people beg the tree guys to take away, and it can turn that waste into a pan-filling dinner that browns and tastes deep and savory. You were trained to walk past wood chips and see yard mess, not food, and if you have ever felt trapped by meat prices, this is the kind of home power that breaks that feeling. I'm not saying mushrooms are beef. I am saying they can replace beef in a meal when you want something filling, and they can do it in the season when everything else feels asleep, which is why people call it free meat. But before you get excited, there is one danger you must respect, because mushrooms are not like tomatoes where you can guess your way through and still be fine, and the mistake that hurts people is simple and common. They eat a mushroom they did not plant. That one bad guess is why mushroom talk got buried for so long, because families passed down fear instead of a method. So here is the safety line that fixes the whole problem and lets you do this calmly. You only eat mushrooms. You grew on purpose from clean spawn, you bought from a trusted seller, and you never eat random mushrooms that pop up on their own, not in your yard, not in a park, not on a stump behind the bins, only the ones you planted on purpose. Now let's clear the other belief that keeps people stuck, the idea that protein only comes from animals and winter food must come from a store, because nature does not agree. In the woods, when a tree falls, the forest does not waste it. It turns it into soil again, and the workers that do that job are fungi, and fungi are their own kind of life, not plants, and their hidden body, called mycelium, spreads through dead wood like a white web and slowly eats it, turning that dead wood into living tissue and richer ground. That is why the idea sounds crazy, but it is true. Something meat-like can grow on trees, not because trees grow meat, but because fungi eat dead wood and turn it into edible flesh. And once you understand that, you start seeing winter as a season with cracks in it where food can still happen. So why did we forget this, and why do most people only know bland mushrooms in a plastic box? Because the food system chose what travels and stays pretty, not what tastes best or keeps you independent. Tough mushrooms can sit in a crate, ride in a truck, sit under bright lights, and still look the same days later, and that makes them easy to sell. But the best eating mushrooms change faster and are best when they are close to where they grew, which fits a backyard better than a supermarket shelf. So the knowledge faded for two reasons at once. Fear pushed people away from mushrooms, and the modern system had no reason to teach a method that lets you turn a free pile of chips into dinner. Now here is where this gets specific, because the organism matters, and picking the wrong one is how people waste months and give up. For this wood chip patch, the best beginner mushroom is the wine cap mushroom, sometimes called the garden giant, because it actually likes living in chip beds outdoors, and it can fruit when weather turns cool and wet, which is why it can feel like dead winter food, not because it grows through hard ice every day, but because it can show up late in the year during cold rainy spells, and even during mild winter thaws when your garden is giving you nothing. There is one visual harvest check that decides whether your first bite feels perfect or disappointing, and it is simple enough to teach to a kid, and I call it the edge down rule. When the cap is still rounded and the rim is still slightly turned down, that is the moment to pick, because the texture is firm and the flavor is best, and when the cap goes flat like a plate, you waited too long and it turns softer and messier. Now let's build the patch in the simplest way that still works. And the first win is location, because a good spot does half the work. So choose a place that stays cooler than the rest of your yard and does not get blasted by wind all day. And a quick test is to walk out after a light rain and notice where. The ground stays darker longer because that is where a chip bed can stay comfortable without you babysitting it. Next, get a real pile of fresh tree chips, not a tiny bag, because depth matters, and the easiest source is a local tree trimming crew who needs a place to unload, and even a neighbor's chip pile can be enough to start small. When you are ready, wet the ground so you are not starting on dusty earth. Lay down plain cardboard. If weeds are a problem where you live, then spread a thick layer of chips, break up your wine cap spawn, and scatter it across the surface. Cover with more chips, scatter again, then top it off until the bed has enough depth that the inside stays steady even when the surface dries a little. Water slowly until you can tell the water has moved through the layers. Then do the part that feels too simple to be true. You leave it alone long enough to take hold, because the fastest way to slow this down is lifting chips every day to check, which dries the bed and breaks the little connections forming inside. Instead, treat it like a quiet corner you keep gently moist when weather is dry, and you let rain do its job when weather is wet, because a soaked bed that never breathes can turn sour, and a bed that turns crunchy never gets going, so you want a calm middle where the chips stay comfortably damp. 2 quiet mistakes kill results before people ever see a single cap. And the annoying part is, the bed still looks normal on top, so they think it is fine until months pass and nothing happens. The first mistake is putting it in harsh sun and wind, because the inside keeps drying even if the top still looks like mulch. The second mistake is panic watering every day, because you can end up with heavy rot instead of a healthy patch. So if you are unsure, water deeper but less often and let the bed rest between soakings. After the bed settles, you may see chips start to cling together in spots, and you may notice pale white threading if you gently lift only the very top in one corner. And that is a sign the patch is building strength, but you do not need to chase it, because the real proof arrives when conditions line up, and it arrives fast. The patch stays quiet. Then a cool, wet stretch hits, and you suddenly see small bumps pushing through the chips, and in a day or two, those bumps can turn into thick caps that look like dinner growing out of mulch. And when you harvest, you twist and lift or cut at the base, then smooth the chips back over the spot like you are tucking a blanket, because the surface does better when it stays covered. After a harvest wave, the bed often rests and then returns when the weather repeats. And the easiest way to keep it strong over time is adding a fresh layer of chips now and then, like you would refresh mulch, because the top settles and breaks down, and a thin new layer helps hold moisture and adds new material for the patch to work through. And now we move to the moment that decides whether you tell people this is real or whether you never bring it up again, which is what you do in your kitchen. When you bring that first harvest inside, do not soak it, because soaking steals the texture, so brush off bits with a dry cloth or soft brush. Let the pieces sit on a towel while your pan heats, and if you are not cooking right away, keep them breathing in paper, not sealed in plastic. For the pan payoff, use heat and patience, because the deep taste comes from browning, and browning only happens when the pieces sit still long enough to get color. So slice thick. Do not crowd the skillet, and start dry for a short moment so moisture can cook off before you add oil or butter. When you add fat and salt and let the first side brown, the sound changes from a wet hiss to a sharper sizzle, and the smell shifts from raw and earthy to roasted and savory, and that is the exact moment the better than beef line starts to feel believable. Flip, brown again, then season simply with garlic and pepper, or add a tiny splash of soy sauce for deep savory flavor, or a pinch of smoked paprika for that grilled note, and finish with a squeeze of lemon if you want it bright. If you want the pulled texture, brown first, cool for a minute, tear into strips, then toss the strips back into the pan for a quick final sear so the edges crisp, because crisp edges are what make it feel like a real filling. From there, it goes anywhere meat would go, into tacos, rice, toast, eggs, pasta, or a quick sauce. And if you want the fastest proof meal, mix the browned strips with a little barbecue sauce and put it on bread, because that is the bite that makes people stop talking and start chewing. If you harvest more than you can eat, the best trick is to store it after cooking, because cooked pieces hold better. So brown a batch, cool it, keep it in the fridge for easy meals, or freeze small portions for quick dinners. And when you reheat, use a hot pan so it wakes back up instead of going soft. Once you taste it, you stop seeing it as a hobby, and you start seeing it as a quiet household habit, like saving jars or saving scraps. And you also understand why this knowledge disappears, because anything that lets normal people turn waste into food at home does not get shouted from shelves. It gets passed hand to hand, neighbor to neighbor, family to family, until somebody stops passing it and it fades. So if you try this and it works, do not keep it to yourself, because that is how forgotten knowledge stays forgotten. And if you want to make this channel worth keeping, tell me what you cooked your first batch with, because that first pan, that first smell, and that first bite is the moment the garden meat patch stops being a story and becomes something you can repeat every time you see a free pile of wood chips.